Thanks for joining today. My name is Rosanne Sprute. I'm one of the clinical trials physicians at our center in Cologne. Today we will talk about the steps to participate in a multi-center trial from the perspective of a trial site. And this presentation will also contain information for a sponsor about the contract with trial sites when setting up a multi-center trial. Setting up a clinical trial requires thorough preparation of both administrative and practical nature. One possibility to hear about a new opportunity to conduct a clinical trial as a trial site can be a feasibility request by a sponsor or CRO. On this slide you can see an example of what a feasibility request looks like. Typically, the feasibility request begins with an introduction where the sponsor provides essential background information. The amount presented or the amount of presented information may vary a lot. The sponsor may also include a questionnaire or a set of specific questions that the site must complete. Sometimes a confidential disclosure agreement, CTA, must be signed before details of the trial are sent out for the first time. This will be discussed in detail later. The feasibility request is used to gather detailed information about a trial site to learn if it is suitable to conduct the trial. This includes multiple points. The trial site should demonstrate general interest in the research topic and have experience in conducting similar trials. It should have access to a sufficient number and diverse subject population relevant to the trial. Factors like the prevalence of the condition and willingness of subjects to participate have to be considered. It should not run any competing trials that could interfere with the recruitment of the subjects or the conduction of the new trial. And the trial site should have the necessary resources, including staff, technical equipment such as freezers, centrifuges, as well as sufficient lab capacity for sample workup and space for the monitor. Before starting and planning a new trial, the study team should perform a capacity check of the site. The capacity check should include a variety of topics. Of course, some or at least the extent depend on the trial. If there is sufficient staff available, if the team is sufficiently trained or qualified, how much time the implementation of the trial at the site would cost, if there is involvement of other departments or partners, if centrifuges are needed, whether there is enough space in the refrigerators and freezers, if an archive with sufficient space for the mandatory file storage is available, whether the existing cabine space is enough, and what the actual cost of the trial will be for the site. Given the trial site is interested and has sufficient capacity to conduct the trial, the next step would usually be to sign a confidential disclosure agreement, in short CTA, sometimes also called non-disclosure agreement or NDA, which warrants that all received information on the trial will be kept confidential. It means that absolutely no information may be passed on to third parties without the written consent of the other contracting party. In the example, you can see the first page of such a CDA. Only after signing the CDA, detailed information on the trial is shared with the prospective trial site. Now this site will get insights into the extent of the trial and can start with the calculations. This can also lead to reconsideration whether the site wants or is able to participate in the trial. Another part of administrative preparations are the negotiations for the clinical trial site agreements. The sponsor who initiates the clinical trial usually provides the CTA to the trial site. The trial site's legal and administrative representatives review the CTA in detail. They may negotiate certain terms such as publication rights and data protection to ensure that the agreement aligns with the site's specific requirements, capabilities, and regulatory obligations. But also the study team at the trial site must access the content of the contract to a certain extent, not just formal aspects. This includes, above all, the review of the services and as specified in the contract, for example, details on SAE reporting or activities in the course of a screening failure. These are details that can generally only be assessed by the site itself, not by the lawyers. During the negotiation process, the site might request adaptations or seek clarifications on a certain clause or provision within the CTA. This back and forth communication helps in reaching mutual agreement between sponsors and the site. Another important part of the negotiations are budget negotiations regarding the financial compensation the site will receive for conducting the trial. This includes payments for trial procedures, subject recruitment, data collection, and other trial-related costs. Since the negotiations in general may take some time, it is important to start the process as early as possible to prevent any delay in trial start. After all negotiations and reviews are completed, the final version of the CTA is prepared and signed by authorized representatives of each party. Whether the signature needs to be wet ink or can be electronic may depend on the contracting parties. Usually the signed CTA is filed in the ISF. However, many organizations have centralized legal or contract management systems where all executed contracts, including CTAs, are stored. In this case, a note to file is provided in the CTA section of the investigator's site file indicating where the original CTA is stored. In some cases, the finalized CTA may need to be submitted to the IRB as part of the overall trial approval process. That is another point why it is very important that the contract negotiations get started quickly. Cost calculations for budget negotiations in a clinical trial involve considering various components that contribute to the overall trial expenses. Following costs have to be calculated. Visiting costs include the compensation paid to the PI and other site staff for their involvement in the trial, conducting trial visits and managing trial-related activities. The site startup cost covers the initial costs associated with activating the site for the trial, such as protocol training, obtaining necessary regulatory approvals, and setting up the trial infrastructure. The administrative overhead costs incurred by the site for trial management include office supplies, administrative staff salaries, and non-direct expenses. Subject compensation refers to payments made to subjects for their time, travel expenses, and possible inconveniences during the trial. The extra budget covers additional expenses that might arise from, for example, during sponsor audits or inspections. The costs achieving includes expenses related to the long-term storage and management of trial documents and data after the trial completion. When negotiating the budget with the sponsor, the trial site should consider these costs and provide supporting documentation or justifications for each item to demonstrate the rationale behind the proposed budget. It is essential to get an idea on what the trial will cost at the trial site and if the provided fee is at least cost covering. Whether the costs are covered may determine whether the site participates in the trial. Please note, industry trials conducted in public institutions such as university hospitals must cover costs by law, and might also bring profit, while investigator-initiated trials often need to be co-financed from the profits generated by the trial site. The European Stat A law was passed to prevent subsidies from state funds that could distort competition. It therefore safeguards the results of the market process. As mentioned before, sponsors may cover certain expenses incurred by subjects, including travel expenses. In this slide, you can see an exemplary form for billing subject travel expenses. Also here, of course, it is important that the sponsor must never see the names of the subjects. It is important to note that each country may have its own specific procedures and requirements for billing travel expenses. The submission procedure will depend on whether it is a clinical trial or clinical study. For a clinical trial, a regulatory approval is needed as well as an ethics opinion, while for a clinical study, only an ethics opinion needs to be obtained. So let's see what sort of documents are usually needed for an ethics submission. After finalization of the CTA, the trial can be submitted to the Institutional Review Board and Ethics Committee. This includes information on the qualification of the study group, such as investigators, current CVs, and other relevant documents, providing quality or evidence of qualification. Furthermore, it includes the informed consent form and other written information to be provided to the subjects. The ICF needs to be adapted for each trial site. Subject recruitment procedures like advertisements, which might need to be adapted, and confirmation of the insurance, including the insurance policy and conditions. But of course, also other documents that the IRB may need for their decisions, such as the study protocol and the investigator's brochure, and available safety information need to be submitted. Sometimes the study protocol includes an investigator signature page that needs to be signed by the PI. A sponsor might have special requirements for documents as well, for example, specific CV template to be used. Please note the documents required for ethics submission can vary between different countries. Each country has its own regulatory requirements and guidelines for conducting clinical trials. It is important to consult with the relevant regulatory authorities in each country to determine the specific requirements for ethics submission. Depending on the local regulatory requirements, additional approval from regulatory authorities must be obtained prior to trial start. In Europe, there is a harmonized procedure to obtain the regulatory approval and the ethics opinion. CTIS is a system for preparing and submitting clinical trial applications and dossiers to the EU and EEA member states. This system supports interactions between clinical trial sponsors, researchers, or companies that run a clinical trial and collect and analyze the data, and regulatory authorities in the EU member states and EEA countries throughout the life cycle of a clinical trial. Submission via CTIS is mandatory for clinical trials, while clinical studies solely need to be submitted to an ethics committee. It is mandatory for any clinical trial, also for monocentric or one country only trials. The submission is made by the sponsor or the sponsor's representative centrally. Since the CTIS submission is quite complex, specific training is required. We recommend to draw on experience of a specialized clinical trial center or a CTIS specialist for any submission. To prepare for the trial at your trial site, you need detailed information on the trial. For this information, please refer to the study protocol. In a previous module, we already discussed the study protocol in some detail, but since it is so important, here is a small recap of where to find information you may need to implement in the trial. Some examples of the information you need for this implementation you can find in the following parts. If you would like to get a quick overview of the trial, the synopsis is very helpful. Details on who will or can participate in the trial can be found under in- and excluding criteria, while details on the content of the trial, so what will be done during the visits, can be found in the visit schedule and the trial's procedures. Details on when to stop the treatment or the follow-up period can be found under end of treatment or end of early termination, and under the visit schedule and trial procedures, respectively. A variety of auxiliary documents can be used for the trial conduct, such as a visit planner. This is a useful tool for study nurses to help organize and manage the visit of a specific participant in a clinical trial. Furthermore, the visit planner allows to have a clear overview of the study protocol, including the specific procedures and assessments required at each visit. This ensures that all activities are properly planned and executed. Another auxiliary document used in clinical trials is the pocket guide. A pocket guide in clinical trials is a concise, easy-to-use reference card that provides essential information about a clinical trial. It is not compulsory but can be very convenient to have, especially with inpatient trials. It is made to be carried in a pocket, for example, your medical code, or to be referred to as needed. In this slide, you can see an exemplary pocket guide from the front. However, it is usually printed on both sides. On the back, you could, for example, print the visit schedule. Next to the auxiliary documents, there are many essential ones that are required for each clinical trial. Let us start with understanding what essential documents actually are in the context of a clinical trial. The ICH-GCP guideline provides us with information on the purpose of essential documents and why they are important. Essential documents are those documents that individually and collectively permit the evaluation of the conduct of the trial and the quality of the produced data. As such, they are used to provide to prove that all parties involved in the clinical trial, like the sponsor, the investigator, or the monitor, work according to the standards and requirements stated in the ICH-GCP and individual national regulations. The sponsor's quality assurance unit will check those documents when performing an audit to comply with the requirements to ensure proper study conduct. Furthermore, they are the basis for external inspections by competent authorities to determine the validity of the conduct of the clinical trial and the credibility of the data. But where can we find the information on what exactly is encountered as an essential document? Chapter 8 of ICH-GCP provides a list of documents organized in document categories, which are essential to provide evidence for details on the clinical trial conduct and compliance with all applicable regulations. The various documents on the list are grouped in 3 sections according to the stage of the trial during which they will be generated. Chapter 8.2 is a list of documents that should be generated during the planning stage and be filed before the trial formally starts. In addition to what has already been filed according to Chapter 8.2, the documents in Chapter 8.3 should be added to the files during the trial to have all new relevant information documented as it becomes available. After completion or termination of the trial, all of the documents identified in sections 8.2 and 8.3 should be in the file together with the documents described in the section 8.4. Once done, the complete documentation about the overall trial conduct is stored at one place in full. You can see here an excerpt of the list from ICH-GCP where you can find the specific title of the document, a description of the purpose of each document, as well as information on whether it should be filed in either the investigator files, the sponsor files, or both. Now that we have seen what documents are essential to a trial and need to be maintained, we also need to know where they are expected to be filed. We learned that there is a collective amount of essential documents that is needed in a trial to document proper trial conduct and a low assessment of data quality. Filing systems have to be established both at the trial site and sponsor's office to ensure that the documents are securely kept and readily available at all times. The so-called trial master files or investigator site files, in case of the site TMF, can be established using the TMF reference model, which provides a harmonized structure and nomenclature, enabling files for all trials across sponsors and countries to follow a similar layout. As a result, there is the sponsor trial master file, the TMF, which provides an overview over the entire trial. It contains documents on trial, country and site levels and gives insights into the trial conduct across all involved parties. It is therefore usually more comprehensive than the site file, the ISF, which provides an overview of the trial conduct only at the individual trial site. Documents comprising the site ISF are used to prove the conditions under which the trial was conducted and contains the sensitive information on trial subject identities. Together, they allow a reconstruction of the whole trial before, during, and even long after the trial has been conducted. One of these essential documents is the case report form, in short, CRF. The CRF is based on the study protocol and allows the documentation of all trial data per subject. The CRF can be paper-based, PCRF, or electronic, ECRF. Nowadays, the ECRF is often preferred as it has multiple benefits due to the direct control of the entry, the so-called edit checks, and for the data management. CRF should meet the following minimum scopes. It should have an in- and exclusion criteria to check if the participant meet the eligibility requirements for the study. It usually includes baseline values as, depending on the trial, the initial weight, initial blood values, and medical history. All trial relevant measures are checked. Furthermore, adverse and serious adverse events, comorbidities, and medication should be implemented. And an end of the study page should capture important information and data related to the completion of the clinical trial. In order to prevent mistakes in the trial, a quality control system has to be established by trial sponsors, the monitoring. Monitoring is a tool to oversee the progress of a clinical trial and to ensure that it is conducted, recorded, and reported in compliance with all requirements. In simpler terms, monitoring is checking how the site is performing the work and if everything is properly documented. Resultingly, the purpose of monitoring is firstly the protection of the rights and well-being of the trial subjects. Additionally, it is used to ensure that the collected and reported trial data are accurate, complete, and can be verified against their sources. Lastly, it serves to ensure that the overall trial is conducted in compliance with the protocol, GCP, and regulatory requirements, just as requested by the sponsor. But what exactly is being monitored and how is this done? First of all, it is the sponsor's responsibility to determine the exact extent and nature of monitoring. It needs to be decided how and when monitoring should be done and what aspects of the trial should be looked at. This decision is based on the characteristics of the individual trial, such as, for example, its objective, design, complexity, size, or endpoints. As a result, ICH-GCP requests from sponsors to develop a systematic, prioritized, and risk-based approach to monitor clinical trials. A risk-based monitoring approach focuses on critical study parameters such as data items and procedures for mitigating and preventing the important and likely risks to safety and data integrity instead of attributing the same need for monitoring to all aspects of trial. This flexible approach allows to choose the most effective and efficient monitoring strategy from different options. You have probably wondered when all these controls take place. The various tasks and responsibilities of a monitor span items from the beginning to the end of the trials. Thus, the monitoring activities are categorized into different types of monitoring visits with a special focus on certain aspects to be checked and discussed. First of all, after a potential trial site confirms their interest in participating in clinical trial, a site selection visit takes place. This serves to check their qualification for participation and is followed after formal selection by the trial preparation, both at the site and the sponsor. Once all regulatory aspects to include the site into the study are finalized, the site initiation visit takes place to formally start recruitment at the site. During a trial conduct at the site, regular monitoring visits are performed to ensure patient safety and data integrity. Lastly, once the last patient has its last visit at the site, a closeout visit is performed to formally end the active trial participation of the site. Following the site selection and trial preparation at the site and by the sponsor, the site initiation visit will be planned. Here, the monitor will explain all responsibilities, tasks, and duties of the trial site during the trial conduct. Once this visit has been properly performed, it is usually the starting point of this site's active trial participation and resulting recruitment of subjects. However, the site should always act according to the specific instructions of the monitor during the visit. In order to plan and perform the site initiation visit, the CTA should be signed and all necessary approvals and votes for the site to be allowed to work in the trial should be available. Additionally, there may be further trial sponsor-specific requirements that need to be fulfilled for the site to be initiated. In any case, it is important that preferably all planned members of the trial staff attend this visit. Usually, during site initiation visit, the monitor will go through the basics of ICH-GCP, the specifics of the trial to ensure the staff has all information needed to properly conduct the trial. This entails, among other aspects, the trial design, all IMP-related information, reporting requirements and details of the informed consent process. At this visit, the monitor will also hand over the prepared ISF, including the trial documents obtained so far, and, if applicable, documentation such as emergency envelopes. Also, the definitions on what will be considered source data at the site or walk through the ECRF with provision of required access will be among the topics. Furthermore, the delegation log will be completed, the CRF will be trained, and query management will be explained. And if applicable, other trainings, for example, for the randomization tool, IMP handling, or sampling handling will take place. Completed trainings will be recorded in the training log. The monitor usually also explains the requirements for archiving and cooperation in case of audits and inspections. Lastly, all open questions can and should be asked during this visit to eliminate all uncertainties before starting the conduct of the trial. On this slide, you can see the before-mentioned signature and delegation log. In the signature and delegation log, tasks and responsibilities are assigned to the trial staff. All involved members of the trial group at the site must be listed in the log. Persons who are not listed in the delegation log are not allowed to carry out any trial-related activities. When completing the log, you must consider a few points. The information entered in all sections of the log should be legible and accurate. The site staff should use the same initials when signing and initiating patient records and trial-related documents in this log. The column for signatures and initials must be handwritten to allow validation of signatures initials used for trial-related documents. In case of trial staff change, the log must be updated in a timely manner. This may include adding new persons or removing someone. It's important to include not only the start but also the end date. It is also possible that duties or responsibilities change during the trial. This case would also require an update of the log, including the timestamps. In case you are unsure on how to fill that form in, eMonitor can help you. Another important log is the training log. This log provides an overview of which trial-related training each staff member has followed. There are different kinds of trainings that might be given as a part of a clinical trial and captured in the log, such as training for the study protocol, lab manuals, investigator brochure for the CRF, and possibly others. This again depends on the trial. In this exemplary training log, we can see how a protocol training that was provided during the site initiation visit is documented in the log. The training log is completed after every training. It typically includes details such as the name of the team member, the date of training, the covered topic, and the name and signature of the trainer. Among some other things, the site initiation visit is a prerequisite for starting the trial at the site. Let's have a closer look on the requirement. First of all, it is important that the approvals from the ethics committee and the competent authorities are obtained. Furthermore, contracts should have been reviewed, negotiated, and approved, including the CTA and, if necessary, subcontracts with pharmacies and laboratories. Comprehensive insurance policies have been concluded and are in effect. The site initiation visit was successfully conducted, ensuring sufficient training of the staff on critical elements such as the CRF and unblinding procedures, if applicable. Another essential requirement is the presence of the ISF at the trial site, containing all essential and relevant trial-related documents. And equally vital is the readiness of the IMP at the trial site. Since the sponsor has the overall responsibility of the trial, the sponsor is required to review all essential components. The trial can only start after receiving the sponsor's approval, often referring to as green light. Make sure that the communication with the sponsor regarding the start of the trial at your site is documented and filed in the ISF. Having started with the trial conduct, the site will be visited by the monitor for regular monitoring visits. These visits serve to ensure the protection of the enrolled subjects, that all data are collected correctly and are valid, and all actions at the site are in compliance with the protocol, SOPs, ICH-GCP, and further applicable regulatory requirements. When and how often these visits are performed is defined in the monitoring plan and depends on factors such as the risk profile of the trial, how long an individual subject participates in the trial, and how fast your site is recruiting. If necessary, further visits than defined in the monitoring plan may be performed. This could happen as a result of centralized monitoring activities of the items that need closer control, that were identified in previous monitoring visits. The item to be checked by the monitor during regular visits can greatly vary depending on the mentioned factors. We will now go through some of the most important and most frequent items that you will encounter during such a visit, but the exact extent will always be very individual. During the regular monitoring visit, a main proportion of the performed activities is taken up by source data review and source data verification. So data review means that the monitor will review the original and individual subject data, including medical records and trial-related data. For example, it will be confirmed whether in- and exclusion criteria were met, adverse events were properly identified and documented, and which medication a subject is taking, and whether it is in agreement with restrictions stated in the protocol. It will also be checked whether all trial-related examinations were properly performed and documented, questionnaires or worksheets were completed, on subject diaries were used, among many other items that may be checked by the monitor. These original data will then be compared with the entries made in the CRF, the so-called source data verification. The amount data verification may be risk-based or up to 100%. Here the entered data are checked for completeness, plausibility and correctness. If any mistakes or inconsistencies are identified, the monitor or sometimes a data manager, perhaps also the system itself, will raise queries that you then need to resolve. Besides the subject-specific original data and CRF entries, the monitor usually also checks the documents expected to be filed at the trial site. Thus, certain parts of the investigator site file are usually monitored as well. Again, the extent of this check is depending on various aspects and described in the monitoring plan. One of the most important tasks when monitoring the ISF is checking the informed consent forms and documentation of the informed consent process in the medical records of the subject. Furthermore, logs such as, for example, the delegation log, drug accountability log, or subject's randomization log will be checked for correctness and completeness. In case of any amendments, changes, or updates since the initial handover of the ISF during the site initiation visit, the corresponding updated documentation is expected to be filed in the ISF. The monitor will thus check it for example, the amended ICFs, ethics votes, insurance rules, or qualification documentations for new trial groups members are present. If the trial is blinded, the emergency documentation such as envelopes will be checked to ensure it is complete and intact, respectively unblinding has been properly documented in case it has been done. Further items and documents to be monitored can be specified in the monitoring plan, such as delivery notes or shipping lists. At the end of a regular monitoring visit, the monitor usually seeks a conversation with the investigator and other involved trial staff to provide details on the monitored items. They will discuss the deviations and/or findings that the monitor identified, corrective and preventive actions to be taken, and specifies the items that need to be resolved by the trial team after the trial visit. Corrective and preventive actions are, in short, CAPA, the whole process which is part of the quality management that the sponsor established for his or her trial. It serves to systematically analyze errors and deviations. Once findings are identified, it will be closely analyzed why they happened, and immediate actions will be taken to correct the error or deviations as far as possible. If the root cause analysis gives reason for this, preventive actions will additionally be developed to avoid that this error will be done in future. The study closeout visit is a visit and process arranged by the sponsor of the research study to ensure that all necessary aspects of the study closure have been addressed, to include organization and completion of the documentation and reporting. It serves to close all open items and formally ends the active participation in the trial of this site. However, the equally important responsibilities of the trial site and investigator beyond the formal trial end are discussed as well. This visit takes place after the last patient visit and before achieving all trial documentation. During the closeout visit, all unresolved items from previous monitoring visits will be closed if necessary. Also, the remaining CRF queries, if any are still present, will be solved so that the investigator can provide his final signature in the CRF. Depending on trial-specific sponsor guidance, the remaining IMP will be prepared for return or destruction, and the blinding material is returned in case it was used in the trial. The ISF will be finally checked for completeness and accuracy, and applicable documents will be collected either as a copy or original file to be stored in the TMF. As mentioned before, although the active recruitment and patient treatment is finalized, there are still responsibilities for the investigator beyond the closeout visit. Thus, the monitor will discuss archiving requirements and arrangements, possibilities for audits and inspections after closeout, and the investigator duty to collaborate in this case, as well as any further regulatory requirement that might be applicable. To document the monitoring activities and findings during the visit, the monitor has to provide a monitoring report to the sponsor after each visit. Written reports of on-site visits or trial-related communication should be provided to the sponsor in a timely manner for review and follow-up. It contains a summary of all data, documents, and further aspects that have been reviewed, the identified findings, deviations, and observations, as well as the monitor's conclusion on those, together with the details on the actions that have been taken or need to be taken to ensure compliance. In order to allow the sponsor to confirm that the monitor has acted according to the pre-specified requirements in the monitoring plan, has reviewed all data in the needed extent, the monitoring activities have to be documented in sufficient detail. Those reports are, as mentioned before, sent to the sponsor, where the site is not receiving them. Instead, the monitor provides them with a follow-up letter after the visit, which summarizes the monitoring activities, provides a list of open items to be resolved together with the timeline to finalize this task. As a last note, these reports have to be provided in a timely manner. And with this, I would like to thank you for joining today. For questions and remarks, you can contact us under the email address given. Many thanks and have a great day. Bye.